What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and I'm not quite bringing you guys a mock draft Monday, but I am bringing you guys a mock draft Tuesday. And I like doing my drafts a little bit later in the week on a Tuesday, just because you get to see that final draft order. And with the Eagles losing to the Seahawks, that does change up the order a bit. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, we got the Chicago Bears. And the big question with the Chicago Bears is if they keep Justin Fields or they choose to draft a quarterback. And I've been drafting a quarterback for him for basically all year, and that's not going to change. I've been drafting Caleb Williams for him forever, and this time I think I'm going to go with Drake May. See if Chicago Bears fans like that one any more than the Caleb Williams pick. I think you can trade Justin Fields for a second round pick and just, start fresh with a new quarterback who's going to be on a rookie contract for the next 4 or 5 years. I think that's the better move. Whether you think it's Caleb Williams or Drake May, I think drafting a quarterback is a smart option. Moving on to number 2, this is another quarterback team, and whether Drake May goes first or Caleb Williams goes first, I think whoever's left over, the Patriots are going to grab a number 2, and in this case it's Caleb Williams. And I think both of these quarterbacks can turn a franchise around, so those are both really, really solid options at quarterback. Moving on to number 3, we got the Cardinals, and it's really just between tackle or wide receiver for them. And I think when you have a quote-unquote generational talent like Marvin Harrison, I think you got to pick him. Pairing him up with Hollywood Brown and having Kyler Murray throwing them the ball, I think that's a deadly, deadly combination. So we're going to go ahead and go Marvin Harrison Jr. here at number 3. And now coming in at number 4, we got the Commanders. And I usually always go offensive tackle, whether it's Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt. But this time, they need edge help too. They have 0 edges on their team, really. After they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young, they have nobody. They have KJ Henry and then a bunch of nobodies. So I really do think it's a solid option to go edge rusher here. Now I know there's no elite edge rusher in this class, but there are some really solid ones that I could see going top 5. And it's really just who you prefer more. Do you prefer Jared Verse, a Laiatu Latu, or a Dallas Turner? And if I'm the Commanders, I think you just go with kind of the middleman. Laiatu Latu might be the best edge rusher in the class. He's got an extensive injury history, and I don't know if you want to draft a guy who's been injury riddled and had to retire due to his injuries, so I don't think you want to pick a guy like that in the top 5. Dallas Turner is a project. He's not going to be a productive edge rusher day 1, at least in my opinion, and I think Jared Verse is right in the middle of high upside, but also is going to give you production day 1, so I'm going to go with Jared Verse here at number 4. Moving on to number 5, we got the Bears picking again. And with them picking Drake May with the first overall pick, I think it's going to be between tackle or receiver. And the Bears' offensive line problems hasn't been coming from tackle. Their tackle spots are pretty solid. Braxton Jones on the left side and Darnell Wright on the right side. It's really their interior of their offensive line. And with the 5th pick, there's no interior offensive lineman worth taking here. I think you can get that somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd round. So with this pick, I'm going to pair up Drake May with a really, really, really good receiver and Malik Nabers. And in most other draft classes, Malik Nabers will be the number 1 receiver by far. But when you got a guy like Marvin Harrison, it's a shame that a guy like Malik Nabers is going to get overshadowed a bit. Because I really think Malik Nabers is a true number 1 receiver on almost any team. Moving on to number 6, we got my favorite team, the New York Giants, picking. And I know the Giants fan base is kind of split between drafting a quarterback and just saying, get rid of Daniel Jones, or, drafting a weapon, maybe draft an offensive tackle to replace Evan Neal because he's been a atrocity. And I'm on board with taking a receiver, but with Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison gone by pick 6, I don't think it's a realistic option to get a guy like Rome Odunze or Keon Coleman or anyone like that at pick 6. That's a little too rich for my liking, and I'm not on board with drafting a quarterback this year. You can't even get out of Daniel Jones' contract until after this next season, so I think it's a bit too soon to overreact and get a quarterback in this draft, especially with the top 2 gone, even though I do really like Jaden Daniels. So I think the only option is to either get Brock Bowers or get one of the blue chip tackles in Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt. I'm leaning more towards getting a tackle, whether it's Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt. You can move them to the right side, and then you can kick Evan Neal into the inside, because believe it or not, Evan Neal's a really good run blocker. He just struggles out on an island by himself in pass protection. So moving him into guard, I'm not saying it's going to be an easy transition for him, because God knows the transition to right tackle from left tackle is not an easy one for him. But I think he's going to be better suited for the offensive guard spot, to where he's not going to be trusted to, pass protect against elite edge rushers by himself. He's going to be in the inside, where he can get more help in the pass protection game, and then he can thrive in the run game, which he's already really good at. Now the question is, do you want Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt? I switched between the two. I think Olu Fashanu's got a higher ceiling than Joe Alt, but I think Joe Alt's got a bit of a higher floor. And, with already, whiffing on an offensive tackle and Evan Neal, I think the Giants are going to want to take the safer option, and I do think the safer option is Joe Alt. So we're going to select Joe Alt here at number 6. And then moving on to number 7, I think the Jets are going to be jumping for joy for having Olu Fashanu still on the board. When Aaron Rodgers comes back next season, you're going to need to get him either weapons or protection. That's really the only two options here. And with the two best wide receivers off the board, and still having a quote-unquote blue-chip prospect and Olu Fashanu still on the board, I think Olu Fashanu is the obvious choice here. Moving on to number 8, we got the Chargers, and I think that with Brandon Staley gone, thank God, I think that they can look to kind of rebuild this offense, because Austin Eckler is looking like he's past his prime. Mike Williams has proven time in and time out that he's not able to really stay healthy. So I think rebuilding this offense is priority 1 for the Chargers. And with no real running back option here in this draft, in the round 1 area, I think you got to go with either receiver or a tight end. And with a really, really good tight end still on the board in Brock Bowers, I think you got to take him. He's probably the best tight end prospect since Kyle Pitts, although they're a bit different. Brock Bowers isn't the elite athlete that Kyle Pitts was, but he's more of that all-around tight end who can block in, is really athletic, and can separate in the receiving game. So I think Brock Bowers is a blue-chip prospect. He's one of probably 3 or 4 in the class. So getting a blue-chip prospect at number 8 is, a great, great start for this Chargers, semi-rebuild. Moving on to number 9, we got the Tennessee Titans. And with Will Levis kind of proven himself to be a starting quarterback in this league, I think they're going to give him a full year to prove himself in next year. And so I think that you need to get him some weapons. DeAndre Hopkins is up there in dog years. Treylon Burks, he's not looking like he's going to be a number 1 option for a team. He's more of that number 2 or number 3 option. And with another really good receiver still on the board in Rome Odunze, I think you got to take him. There's probably going to be 6 or 7 receivers taken in the first round come draft day. This is a really, really loaded receiver class. Obviously, with some people maybe returning like a Brian Thomas or a Emeka Egbuka, but I'm still going to include them in this draft. So we're going to take Rome Odunze here at number 9, get Will Levis a weapon to throw to. Moving on to number 10, we got the Falcons, and I think this has to be a quarterback spot. I mean, Desmond Ritter's not it. He's constantly getting benched for Taylor Heineke, and Taylor Heineke's definitely not a starting quarterback in this league, especially a franchise quarterback. And with a former Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels, still on the board, I think you got to take him. Jaden Daniels and Bijan Robinson in the backfield, as long as Arthur Smith, if he's still there, chooses to use his weapons, I think that's a deadly, deadly offense to come. With Jaden Daniels, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, that's a really scary offense as long as you get a coach that knows how to use them. And I don't know if Arthur Smith is that coach, so it's going to be interesting to see if he stays around for another year. Moving on to number 11, we got the Green Bay Packers. And I think it's really between a offensive tackle or a defensive back. And with the top 2 offensive tackles already off the board, you kind of drop down a tier to the J.C. Lathams of the world and Amarius Mims of the world. Or you could go with the first defensive back off the board with either a Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins, maybe a Cooper DeJean. Tyrion Arnold's really rising up people's draft boards. So I think the Packers would look to take the first option of defensive back off the board. I think this is right around where they're going to start going off, because I don't think there's an elite cornerback option in this class, but there's a lot of really, really solid ones. And so it's really between Kool-Aid McKinstry and Nate Wiggins for me. Kind of like Olu Fashanu and Joe Alt. I flip-flop between these two and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Nate Wiggins. And this time I'm going to go with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Pair him up with Jair Alexander. I think that's a really, really solid duo. Moving on to number 12, we got the Raiders. And they could look to draft a quarterback, although Number 12, taking the 4th quarterback off the board isn't ideal. I think you can maybe get a solid day 2 option if you really wanted to go down that route. But with this 12th pick, I think I'm going to look to go for an edge rusher. And it's going to be between Laiatu Latu or Dallas Turner. And I really think Laiatu Latu is going to fall down people's boards just because of the injury history. I think he's going to go to more of a win now type of team. Like I'm looking right now, maybe the Seahawks, the Bills maybe. So we'll see where we decide to go with Laiatu Latu. But I think for a rebuilding team, or I guess a semi-rebuilding team, they're going to go with a younger, more upside edge rusher, and that's going to be Dallas Turner. Moving on to number 13, we got the Saints. And I really am not a big fan of Trevor Penning. I never was, and it's looking like he's not going to be able to be a starter in this league, especially at tackle. So I think you're going to look to go with the offensive tackle, whether that's Talise Fuaga, J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims. And with Amarius Mims still not, declaring or returning, I'm going to go with Amarius Mims, although I do think he should return just because he was injured a bit this season. He wasn't really able to showcase his talent, but I really do think Amarius Mims, if he does come out this draft, is going to be my 3rd tackle, right behind Olu Fashanu and Joe Alt. So we're going to go with Amarius Mims here. Moving on to number 14, we got the Denver Broncos. Another quarterback team, I guess, but I really don't think they draft a quarterback in the 1st round this year. I'm going to look more towards the defensive backs. And you could pair up Terrion Arnold with Pat Surtain, an Alabama duo, but I think Nate Wiggins is the obvious choice here if you're going to go defensive back. Moving on to number 15, we got the Seahawks, and I think this could be a Laiatu Latu pick. They're a more competing team, which is ideal for a guy like Laiatu Latu, who is a bit older and injury prone. Or I don't want to say injury prone, but has an extensive injury history. So we're going to go with Laiatu Latu here. Moving on to number 16, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this could be a offensive line spot, a cornerback spot. This could be the first linebacker off the board, although I don't really think there's a true 1st round linebacker in this class. So I think this could be a Talise Fuaga spot, maybe a J.C. Latham. I'm a bit higher on J.C. Latham than I am Fuaga. So we're going to go with J.C. Latham here. Moving on to number 17, we got the Cardinals. And this is their 2nd pick. We chose to go with a Marvin Harrison with the 3rd overall pick. And here at 17, I think you're going to look more towards the defense, probably the defensive line. And you could look to go with a Chop Robinson, who's got a high ceiling, but a very, very low floor, in my opinion. I'm not too high on Chop Robinson. Jerzad Newton, who a lot of NFL people are saying might not be a 1st round player. I think that's bullcrap. I think he's definitely a 1st round player. If Kalaja Kancey can go in the 1st round, I don't see why Jerzad Newton can't go in the 1st round. So I'm going to go with Jerzad Newton here. They don't really have anyone in that defensive interior spot. And although he's a little undersized, he is a really great pass rusher. He can get in the backfield with ease. And so I think that's a very valuable to a team like the Cardinals. Moving on to number 18, we got the Buffalo Bills. And this is probably going to be a defensive back spot with Kaiir Elam not really working out for him and Trey White injured. I think that they're going to need a cornerback. I think that you could pair up a guy like Terrion Arnold with Trey White once he comes back from injury, and I think that'll be a really, really solid duo. So we're going to go with Terrion, or actually, we still got Cooper DeJean on the board, don't we? Ooh, do we go with Terrion Arnold or Cooper DeJean? I like the versatility of Cooper DeJean a lot more. I mean, you can play him at safety, you can play him at slot corner, and you can even play him on the outside. I'm actually leaning more towards Cooper DeJean. Let's go Cooper DeJean here. On to 19, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they really need a lot. They could, draft a quarterback, maybe a Bo Nix, Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy even, but I really like how Baker Mayfield's been playing, and I don't think he's necessarily a franchise quarterback, but I think depending on what they're going to try to do, whether they're going to keep trying to compete or rebuild, because I thought they were going to be a little bit worse than they are this season, so I think they are probably going to choose to keep Baker Mayfield. And if that's the case, I think they're going to look towards the defense. and try to get that edge rusher, because Shaq Barrett's, not the same player as he used to be. And I think that you could either go Chop Robinson or Braylon Trace. I'm a bigger fan of Braylon Trace, but Chop Robinson upside is, massive. But I'm going to end up going with Braylon Trace. I just think he's that bigger body, that more powerful pass rusher. So we're going to go with him. Moving on to pick 20, we got the Vikings, and I think this is a perfect Bo Nix spot. Bo Nix is my 4th quarterback. He's really between my 3 and 4. I don't know who I like better right now, whether it's Bo Nix or Jayden Daniels, but with Jayden Daniels off the board, I think Bo Nix could be that distributor to the Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And I think he's plays a bit like Kirk Cousins, where he's not going to be that massive improviser, but he's going to get the ball to his weapons. So we're going to go with Bo Nix here at 20. Moving on to 21, we got the LA Rams. And I think this is a really good spot for Chop Robinson. They need a lot of work on that defense, and they're going to have time, because I'm sure they're going to go into a rebuild now with Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, and Matthew Stafford all getting up there in age. So I think they're going to be forced to go into more of a rebuild here soon. And why not get Chop Robinson, who they can take the time to develop? He's not going to have to be a contributor day one. They're not going to really need him to do that. So let's go with Chop Robinson here. Moving on to 22, we got the Indianapolis Colts. And I think this could be a good receiver spot. With Anthony Richardson coming back next season, I think you're going to want to get him as much weapons as possible. And Josh Downs has been looking like a home run pick. And you also got Michael Pittman. But you don't really have that alpha receiver, I don't think. I don't really think Michael Pittman's that guy. I think he's more suited to be a number 2 receiver. And I know PFS pretty low on Keon Coleman, but I think Keon Coleman at 22 is a really solid option here. He can be that alpha receiver, that deep threat who's a massive contested catch guy. So let's go with Keon Coleman here. Moving on to 23, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think this could be a Troy Fautanu spot. I really do think they need to address their offensive line, because Trevor Lawrence could be a really good quarterback as long as he has time to throw. And so it's really between Talise Fuaga for me, or where is he at? Or Troy Fautanu. Now, Troy Fautanu is listed as a tackle, but I think he's more fitted for a guard spot. So it's really, who do you want to replace? Do you want to replace Troy Fautanu, or do you want to replace Walker Little, or do you want to replace Ezra Cleveland? I'm going to look more towards the Troy Fautanu pick, just because I'm not a big fan of Ezra Cleveland. I don't think he's the answer to the offensive guard spot. So we're going to go Troy Fautanu there. Moving on to 24, we got the Bengals, and I think they're also a offensive line needy team. And I think they're going to go with Talise Fuaga. He's more of that, power run kind of blocker. And you can always get Joe Burrow more protection. So let's go Talise Fuaga here. Moving on to 25, I think this is a very obvious wide receiver team. I mean, if you watch Chiefs football this season, it's been hard to watch. I mean, Patrick Mahomes doing the best he can, but his receivers are not the greatest. And as a Giants fan, I'm glad to see Kadarius Toney, just shit the bed. So I think this is going to be a receiver spot. There's a lot of good receivers still on the board. You got a Brian Thomas, a Troy Franklin, and a Emeka Egbuka, A.D. Mitchell. I think the best alpha receiver on the board is Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I think Brian Thomas Jr. may return. I think that would probably help his draft stock a bit, but with him not returning yet, I think we're going to go with Brian Thomas. I think he could be a number 1 receiver for a team, and especially on a team with Patrick Mahomes, that could be a really, really fun sight to see. Moving on to 26, we got the Houston Texans. And I think this could be a cornerback spot, because I don't really think they need a receiver. I mean, Tank Dell's been really good. Nico Collins is solid. They still got Noah Brown. So I think this could be a Terrion Arnold spot. Pair him up with Derek Stingley. I actually really like that, because Steven Nelson's not going to be on the team forever. He's getting up there in age. Let's go Terrion Arnold. Moving on to 27, we got the Detroit Lions. And I think they need to get Aiden Hutchinson some help. Well, not offensive tackle, edge rusher. And, the premier talent at edge rusher is gone. A lot of people were high on JT Tuimoloau. I really like Chris Braswell. I think the best edge rusher here is JT Tuimoloau. Now, do we go with an edge rusher, or do we go with a cornerback? You still got a Kamari Lassiter, Quinion Mitchell, Kalen King. You know what? Let's go with JT Tuimoloau. I think he has really, really high flashes, but also is a bit inconsistent. So, but as a number 2 pass rusher on a team, along with Aiden Hutchinson, I think he should be pretty good. Moving on to 28, we got the Philadelphia Eagles, and coming off of that bad loss against the Seahawks, I don't think James Bradberry has many games left as an Eagle. So we're going to look to replace him with this pick. Also, Darius Slay's getting up there in age as well. I think it's just an all-around good idea to, kind of prepare for the future. And I think it's between Kamari Lassiter and Quinion Mitchell. I mean, we could go with the meme and go with Kamari Lassiter because he's a bulldog, but I really like Quinion Mitchell. He's a super athletic guy. He's really sticky in coverage, and I think he's a perfect pick for the Eagles. Moving on to 29, we got the Miami Dolphins, and I think it's obvious what you got to do here. Teron Armstead's almost always injured, and I think you need to get yourself a security blanket and a eventual replacement for Teron Armstead. And I think the perfect player for that is either Kingsley Suamataia or Jordan Morgan. I'm not too high on Tyler Guyton. I'm a bit higher on Kingsley Suamataia than I am on Jordan Morgan. I think Suamataia has a bit of a higher ceiling than a Jordan Morgan, so we're going to go with Suamataia. Moving on to the Cowboys, I think they want to get back to their run-heavy offense, and to do that, you need a bit of a better offensive line. I'm not the biggest fan of Tyler Biadasz, and Graham Barton, although it says he's a tackle and that's what he plays in college, he was recruited as a center. He's played offensive guard and he plays tackle now, so he's really just a Swiss Army knife on that offensive line. He can really play anywhere, but I think he's best suited as a center, and that would be a great pick for the Cowboys. Moving on to 31, we got the 49ers, and really this could just be a luxury pick, but I also think they should look to the future. With Trent Williams up there in age, although he's still playing at an elite level, I think it would be smart to kind of look towards the future and kind of have him mentor the next great tackle maybe. And I think it's going to be between Tyler Guyton, even though I'm not a big fan of him, or Jordan Morgan. And I think under Trent Williams' kind of mentorship, I think Jordan Morgan could be a really solid tackle in the league one day. And then moving on to the last pick, we got the Baltimore Ravens. And they don't really have many receivers under contract. Odell Beckham was more of a one-year rental. Pretty sure Rashad Bateman's up for a contract. They did just draft Zay Flowers, but he's really the only receiver on that team that's under contract. And so I think you could look to draft another receiver in the first round. And with guys like Troy Franklin, Emeka Egbuka, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Legette still on the board, I think you're probably going to look to get one of these guys. And I'm really high on Troy Franklin. He's my favorite player in the draft. So why not sneak him into the end of the first round? I think he's around that range. Although you could look for an A.D. Mitchell or an Xavier Legette would also be a solid option. But yeah, that's going to do it. This is my draft. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.